Gen Z trusts influencers more than they trust their own friends. And that is fucking scary.
Uh-oh.
Because uh-oh is right. You're allowed to be bummed. You're allowed to be sad in dating. You're allowed to say, fuck, man, I'm tired and I'm just been doing this for a long time and I want a partner. You can have all of those while also knowing you're not just going to take whatever's off the street. Just because you're thirsty doesn't mean you drink the poison. One of my clients is like a celebrity client, and she actually had a guy where at first she was like, wow, we have so much in common, until she realized he had been ChatGPTing her while they were talking and was getting information about her while they were talking.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Psychobabble with Joe Nucci. Today, we are talking to Sabrina Zohar. Many of you know Sabrina Zohar from her own podcast, The Sabrina Zohar Show, and her content on Instagram, TikTok, etc., where she talks all about relationships and dating and all sorts of really, really important and applicable topics to you all. Sabrina, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, Joe, I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much. And for anyone who doesn't know, you're on my show too, so they could get more of us.
Yes, correct. And listen, I just want to preface this by saying, as you know, even though I am a practicing psychotherapist, I'm not anti-coach. I love other coaches in media. I love the coaches in my life. Many of them have helped me. But today, Sabrina, I have an intellectual bone to pick with some of you dating and relationship coaches. I want to know what you think of this thesis. So when I first started coming onto social media, when I started making videos, when I started watching other videos, I started seeing this talking point. And it's not just coaches that say it, it's other therapists, other experts. And they all kept on saying this same thing. They kept on saying, chemistry is unhealthy. The spark is unhealthy. If you feel that, you know, those butterflies, those feelings, that is not attraction, that is not compatibility, run. It's your anxiety. That is a red flag. And I saw it so many times, so frequently, that I was actually like, wait a minute. Did I miss something in graduate school? Like, did I forget to do an assignment one day for class where this talking point was there? And of course, you know, me being single and dating and being on my own journey, although we all are, even if you're in a relationship or even if you're not, I got to be honest, I was a little bit self-conscious about it. And I was sitting there and I'm thinking, what am I missing about this? But I've been thinking about it, and I've been thinking, you know what? I'm trying to find like the thinker or the researcher who said this. I can't totally pinpoint an exact one. And so my thesis is not that I agree that chemistry is unhealthy. I think like so much that I talk about, whether it's about trauma or narcissism, I think the issue with this psychobabble sometimes is that these words can mean a lot of different things, and there's just so much value in really dissecting what it is that they mean. And so my thesis for you is, do you agree that when we say chemistry is unhealthy, we are actually mean so many different things by chemistry, and chemistry is not necessarily good or bad, it simply is, and it's important to know all the different facets of it.
100%. I will pick the same bone with you, truth be told, because like I see the same internet, and for me, what I hear is it's black and white thinking, right? If it's not this, it's this. And to me, I think we need to be able to incorporate a lot of that gray and that nuance, right? Like it's not always one size fits all, unless you're talking about something that's like actually diagnosable, and that's like a textbook behavior. So what I see a lot is the same thing as you, is it's a lot of sweeping generalizations. Now, how I like to look at the spark and all of this chemistry and all of those things is like I think the issue that, and the reason I think perhaps, I'm not going to speak for all dating coaches, but I'll speak for myself. The reason that I tell people not to chase the spark is it's the same thing as telling an alcoholic not to have a drink, right? So it's like, if you're somebody that can go out and date and have healthy connections and experiences, like you feel this really amazing connection or you feel this chemistry, but you leave going, hey, I also don't know who this person is. I've only met them once, right? Like if you're somebody that can take control of your life and be able to do and say, we had amazing chemistry, don't get me wrong, but that doesn't mean it's compatibility. Great, go have fun, go have your cocktail, right? Like to me, that's like a person walking into a bar saying, I'm just going to have a drink and I'm going to go home. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people that don't know how to differentiate. And so they're consistently going out and saying, oh my God, I met these people. They're amazing. I met this man or this woman or this they. They checked every box. Oh my God, the date was amazing. They're so attractive. And you're like, okay, great. Like then yay, go off and date and go in to get to know this person. Then I get the, oh, but I didn't feel the spark. And that is when I have an issue, because it's like, whoa, 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 you're waiting for a very specific feeling. And when we really start to trace back those feelings, it's like, okay, every time you've specifically felt the spark, oh yeah, they end up being like a narcissist or emotionally unavailable. It's like, okay, if we look at the, I think it's 2015 study that Harvard did on the spark, what they really started to study and understand was like what is happening in your neurochemicals and with your neurotransmitters, right? And so they really saw that really high spike in cortisol. Of course, you're stressed, you don't know, there's a mix of excitement, and then the mix of dopamine and neuroepinephrine. I fuck it up every time and I sound like a moron when I say it. So,
no, I think that's correct.
That's correct, right? I had to say it like 60 times because I just kept saying it wrong. So because between those kind of that like cocktail, I think what we end up seeing is a lot of people overlooking somebody that might be more secure or healthy or maybe just a little bit more closed off at first. That's not super outward and gregarious and all of those things. And people are writing those people off. And so for me, that's when I'll say, hey guys, stop chasing a feeling and actually start to ask yourself, like, how do I feel with this person? Do I enjoy their company? Chemistry is awesome. It's fun. It's sexy. But chemistry alone is not a relationship, right? And so I think it's kind of the same. It's like saying, well, I can only function if I have a drink. And you're like, okay, that's a problem, right? If you can only function when you have this specific emotion and feeling, to me, I think we're limiting ourselves. So that's where the nuance comes in that I think is missing, is we have to also look and see who are the parties that are engaging in the spark debate. And are these people responsible enough to be able to say, hey, you're right, I don't know this person, they were great, we had great chemistry, the sex was fantastic, or I had a really fun time. That doesn't mean that I'm ready to be in a relationship. A lot of people will go and say, I had the spark on the first date, that's my partner, that's the one, that's my twin flame or my soulmate. That's when it becomes dangerous, because you're like, no, that's just your body reacting positively or negatively to this person. We don't have enough data points to be able to deduce and say, oh, that's it, they're the one.
Yeah. Well, I wholeheartedly agree. And I really like the comparison you made to someone with substance misuse disorder. I sometimes talk to different clients or patients, and I'll say, like, you know what? People who don't struggle with addiction, who don't struggle with substance misuse, they're allowed to partake in party culture. They're allowed to drink, they're allowed to get drunk sometimes, they're even allowed to, at least as far as mental health is concerned and not the law, they are allowed to partake in, different recreational substances, and they will probably be okay. That is not the deal that you necessarily have. Or people, when it comes to diet culture, right? People can participate in diet culture all they want. If you have a history of disordered eating or an eating disorder, the costs are going to be so much higher. And so what I hear you saying is that if you have a history of problematic relationships or intimacy issues that you're working on with a coach or in therapy or like whatever it might be, then maybe like pause. Maybe your barometer of the chemistry or the spark isn't necessarily something you should trust so implicitly.
Exactly. Can I share a story that I think will seal the deal of what we're talking? Okay. Buckle up. It's not that long, but it's just interesting. I had to have been like 23 or 24. I am 34 now. So it's about 10 years ago when I lived in New York, and I matched with this guy on whatever app it was. And it was one of those things where like the minute we walked in, I was in full-blown sweat. Like, my heart was... Like, this was a male Adonis. Like, this was chiseled out of fucking stone. One of the most good-looking humans I've ever met. Super successful. Very well-dressed. Like, he had a whole thing. And we spent 5 hours on the date. And, sitting there at the bar to the point where the bartender was like, how long have you guys been together? Like, you guys have something... There's just quite a spark here. And I remember we fooled around. We didn't hook up or anything. I just remember we made out and hands were traveling and stuff like that. And even me, I was like, no. Like, come on, let's go a little slow. I don't want to do that. And he was like, okay, cool. Plans a date for later in the week. And I remember calling my mom and I'm like, oh my God, this guy, he has to be it. I can't tell you the spark that I felt on this date. This was something I've never felt before. Fast forward a couple of days later, I get a text from him canceling the date because he's like, hey, I'm heading. He lived in California. I lived in New York at the time. And he was, the fun story where they always claim I'm there all the time. And then you find out this person only has come once.
Oh my gosh. Classic New York dating problem for anybody listening. Right,
exactly. Same with LA. It's the classic, oh, they're in town. Oh, I'm here all the time. And you're like, yeah, okay. So, long story medium, he cancels it and he sends me a photo of him at the airport and he's like, I'm so sorry. My company got like broken into. I have to head back. Okay, what are you going to do? We keep in contact for a little. It starts to, and like, I'm just going based on this spark. Like, he's to me, I'm like, he's the one that got away. This is my person. Like, I am creating castles in the sky with this. Fast forward, like a year goes by, we never meet back up. And it's like always that texting on and off. I find out like within that year, like he has a girlfriend. He didn't have one when I met him, gets one that lives next to him. Okay, what are you going to do? I never see her face. Then I see, it's like one of those things that we kept following, unfollowing. He was private. Okay, we follow each other again. I see he has another girlfriend, a different girl this time. Okay, we unfollow. Fast forward to COVID, we're doing all the flirting, all of this. Oh, I want to make this work. And I'm telling my mom, I'm telling you, this spark. It was everything. Fine. Then fast forward, I moved to California, 2021, 2022. This is when I'm moving to San Diego, and he and I are talking again. And that's when he starts to tell me like, yeah, he started to listen to Andrew Tate. And I was like, oh, okay. Ooh, yikes. Okay. So he's very red pill kind of that mentality. And I was like, okay, so I'm starting to now realize like maybe we don't have that much in common. And I started to realize in this conversation that this is when I started dating my partner. And so it was very much where I was like, I'm turning into his therapist. Like I'm not even, this is this guy going off on his shit and me being like, oh, let me help. Fine. We leave it at that. Fast forward. Another year goes by and I'm getting tattooed and I'm talking to the girl. And mind you, I'm in San Diego. She's a friend of my sister's. There is no correlation at all besides knowing each other now. And I'm telling her about this guy. And I was like, oh, blah, blah. Oh my God, I never forget. And I'm telling her about him. And as I'm seeing, I just kind of see her face doing a like, wait, what did you say his name was? I'm sorry. Remind me, where did he work? And I started to see, and I was like, why? And then the minute I said, oh, his name is blank, right? I said the full name. She literally just stopped and froze. And I was like, are you okay? And she just just turns to stone and cries hysterically. And she was like hyperventilating. And she was like, that was my ex-boyfriend. He was a raging narcissist. He turned me into a shell of a human. Like she's going into PTSD. Like this girl is losing her shit because this guy ruined her. All that. And I'm sitting there and I was like, oh my fucking God, he sounds like my dad. And that's when I realized, I was like, every single time I've ever had this crazy spark, I can't get over them, this like intense, wild, I'm hyperfixated because they reminded me of somebody like my father who was a narcissistic piece of shit and who was really unhealthy. And I share that just because you see how I was going based on only the spark. I didn't know anything about this guy. He was sexy, he had a nice dick, and he was good looking, right? Like, okay, I didn't know anything of depth about this person. Just to show, thank God I didn't see him. Thank God that didn't happen because it saved me years of therapy and PTSD when someone talks about him and breaking down into tears. Because the spark, albeit it might be fun, sure, have a great night, but that doesn't mean that this is your person and that that's the only person you can date. Because again, when you're chasing a feeling, you can't be shocked when that feeling potentially goes away one day and then what are you left with?
I love how you're drawing the distinction here between the long-term compatibility, like the researchers call it, like the companionate love, right? The intimacy versus like the desire, like the spark, the passion. These things aren't necessarily good or bad. I don't think that's what you're saying because I would imagine you still do have a lot of those desirous qualities, like with your partner now, but you also have that other piece.
Exactly. And here's the thing. When I met my partner, it wasn't a big, oh my God, it was very calming. It was like, oh, he's nice. He's a nice guy. But then when we kissed and we had an intimate moment, I was like, oh, okay. That's where the desire and that chemistry started to come in. But it wasn't this like outwardly, truth be told, had we not been intimate, I don't know that I would have seen him again because it was very muted. And that's, I think, what we overlook. We overlook people that are just a really nice connection that could grow into something and could grow into a really beautiful love. But maybe off the bat, it's not that. And that's, I think, that distinction of like, hey, you want to go for chemistry and connection? Absolutely. It's a beautiful thing to happen. But like you were saying, there's a bit of an overlap, right? Desire, connection, intimacy. There's a distinction between each. And yes, they all have a place, but individually, it's not enough just to have one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when people talk about the spark or chemistry, something that's very confusing is it's kind of like, well, is this desire chemistry or is this intimacy chemistry? And I'm kind of imagining this like Venn diagram where there's kind of like, different types of chemistry and some of them overlap where kind of, on one side there's, there's mystery. You don't know this person yet, but you want to know them, right? Like you want them to like you want them to pick you, whatever it is. When you don't know someone that well, there's an inherent unavailability because you don't know yet, if they're emotional and available, and you kind of go for it. But then I'm also kind of imagining, well, but that also doesn't necessarily explain like pheromones. Or like kind of what maybe it's when some people say chemistry, they mean that they don't necessarily mean that there's this person who's, just far enough away. They can't quite grab onto them, but they want to. Maybe what they mean is just like, it's kind of that animalistic instinct, like something based off of smell or taste.
Yes. 100%, because what we forget about pheromones is evolutionary, right? So like if I look like my partner, he's somebody that's like a broader, stronger human. And so me, I instinctually like just that connection, that like physicality of it is, oh, I'm safe, right? He's a provider for me. And we forget pheromones. Pheromones are, first of all, not only could they make a relationship, they can also break it. I don't know about you. I personally have dated people that we weren't intimate. And then when we were, and I start to realize our scents don't really match, I wasn't really as into them with that pheromones and what was coming off. I realized, yeah, listen, to holding two conflicting thoughts, they could be a great person. I can have a nice time with them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that in the long run, it's going to be something, because intimacy just means trust. Okay. What does trust need? Trust needs time to build, right? Trust needs consistency and reliability. A lot of these aspects. What does chemistry need? Usually something quick, right? A spark. A spark is just an initial animalistic, ooh, I have a primal reaction to this, which is fine. Great. Have fun. Again, where it becomes dangerous is construing that as this is my person and saying, no, but I have to be with this person. Look at the spark that I felt. When oftentimes that can also even just be familiarity. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that this person is that unique or special. It could just mean that they trigger a core belief and remind you of your mom or dad. And that's really repetition compulsion at its finest.
Yeah. You talked about in this story that you told about how you thought that there were relationships of your past, or maybe you said it was your dad. Talk to me a little bit about projection and how you understand it, because I think that sometimes people think that it means that that it's doesn't feel real, or it shouldn't feel real, or you shouldn't act on it. One of my theses about projection is that, well, if we didn't project on each other a little bit, we would never make it to a second date.
100%.
What do you think about that?
It's like having faith and hope, right? It's blind. I don't see it, but I know that it could exist. So I definitely believe when it comes to projection, I think we forget how often people project onto us. And I think, to your point, projection doesn't mean it's a fantasy. It doesn't mean it's delusion. Projection just means that the past is potentially becoming the present and we're putting that onto the other person. So if for instance, if I don't trust anybody, right? I think everyone's going to lie to me, and those are my own core beliefs. Maybe I've learned that in childhood. And now if I project that onto you, then that means now every time you do something, I'm going to say, what, are you lying to me? Are you cheating? And it's like, no, I'm projecting my discomfort onto you. You didn't do anything. It's not like maybe you were on your phone going, what? What are you talking about? I'm making my issue now yours, and I'm putting it as you're doing something to me to reaffirm that what I believe is actually happening. That's been my understanding of projection. So how does that come into dating? If I'm like, when I met this beautiful, handsome man, if I projected onto him all of these things I would have wanted him to have been, well, then I'm not actually looking at who he really is. I'm looking at the idea that I'd like him to be, and I'm creating this narrative and fantasy on his behalf, but I'm not actually seeing him and going, oh, well, but he doesn't know how to communicate with me. So obviously all of this stuff is not going to genuinely happen. And it could go vice versa. You can have an amazing partner and project them your insecurities and say, well, you don't like me because I'm fat. And it's like, what? I didn't say that, but that's how I feel. And I'm making that now how you're feeling and how you're perceiving it and what you believe. And the reason that can become dangerous isn't because it's not real, but it's not factual. It might not be based in factual information, and it might not be based in the present moment. Is it a feeling that could feel real to you? Abso-fucking-lutely. But because when we go back into a different part in our brain and I'm projecting that onto you, I genuinely believe that that's what's happening, because that's the place and the space that I'm coming from.
Yeah. And I want people who are listening to remember that, you also project the good and positive things from your past
Totally.
as well, because what's happening when you meet someone and the psychoanalytic interpretation is you project that ideal onto them, and whatever you're projecting has to be informed by what you've experienced. And so it's kind of all of it. It's not just your parents. It's past relationships. It's your fantasy life. It's all of the above.
Totally. It's the Backstreet Boys obsession that I had as a teenager. It's the, you know what I mean? It's like, it's all of those things mounting and compiling. And like you said, it doesn't always have to be negative. It can be positive as well. We just have to look and say, you know, how much of it is them and how much of it is us.
I want to ground all of this in an example. I'll use myself as an example because I think that sometimes these terms, while all very useful, and it's very useful to dissect them like we are, it can start to feel a little like dizzying. And so I'll just use myself. Actually, last night, it is cuffing season. It's the fall. It's a big dating time in New York. I went on a fantastic first date. And when I got there, the first thing I noticed immediately is like, oh, I'm attracted to him. You know, for sure. Like I like that I said yes. We met on an app, as people so often do nowadays. And so there's that, and I'm just kind of curious. I'm making stuff up about it. It's kind of like, you know, is that pheromones? Is that projection? Like we don't know yet, right? I'm just kind of being curious, but I know that it feels good. And then when we're on the date, I had this really lovely experience where there were just really random things in common that I don't often get to share with many people. And I remember feeling this feeling in my body. It was just so delightful. You know, and I'm not sure, maybe I'll actually pose it to you, you know, is that feeling, you know, is that desire, you know, is it intimacy? It's like, oh, look at what we share. Is it like, now I want to get more of it? Is it some combination? Like, how would you help me, and by extension, anyone who's listening, get better connected to their experience when they're on that first or second date?
Which is a great question. I think so. It's like, if we even start to strip down, if you were to tell me, okay, wow, I felt really safe around him, right? Okay, so I felt really good. Okay, so what does good mean? And so, like, if it was, I feel really safe. Okay, well, what made you feel safe about this? And if you were like, well, he listened, he answered questions, I said something to him, he didn't attack me. Okay, so then what it sounds like is you had a really great date and you'd like to see this person again. Right. And it's like, it sounds like you connected on baseline things of like, oh, wow, we have similar morals, ethos, and ethics, right? We're compatible in certain aspects. We're also attracted to each other. There is a chemistry connection. But that would be the extent of it. I would just say, great. So it sounds like you want to have a second date. Anything above that sounds irresponsible, of like, oh my God, is he the one? Oh my God, this has to be it then, right? No, just because you had an amazing time doesn't that then mean that in a month from now, you guys realize, whoa, never mind, we are completely polarizing on that and we don't agree with that. So I think what ends up happening is, I think we take, like to your point, a lot of these terms and these things could feel heavy. And I feel like it's the same with trying to diagnose everyone as a narcissism or trying to understand everyone's attachment style. I don't think we need to give more credit than it's due, besides saying, I felt good in my body. This person listened to me. I felt seen, heard, and understood. I felt respected. This is enough for me to say, I'll go out with this person again because I know that there's a baseline of attraction. I enjoyed my time with them. And I'm thinking about them after the date. Sounds like something I'd like to pursue. To me, when we start to get of like, oh, but am I projecting onto them? It's like, I won't know, because we need more time to see if what you think he is actually who he is. And that's going to take time. It's going to take us seeing, is he consistent? Is this person being reciprocal? Are they showing up the same? And it's hard to gauge that after one date. And I think that's where it becomes irresponsible, is people will come home and be like, I met that's my husband. I met them. And you're like, oh, wow, that's putting a lot of pressure onto the situation when you just knew that you had a good time. And baseline, correct me if I'm wrong, you said, Joe, that you'd like to see him again and potentially have sex with him because you're attracted to him. But I would imagine we can't really learn more of, he would be a great father to my children, based on what information?
Yeah, exactly. Based on the few hours we spent together.
Right. So all you know is, I'd like to see him again. Absolutely. Fuck yeah, I'm here for that. That's where I think it's very responsible. You were giddy, you had a good time, but you're also grounded, going, oh my God, that was so much fun. It felt really good. But you're not seeing it as like, there's no one else. I have to have this. But it's oh, that was a refreshing exchange. I can't wait to see if we go out again.
All right. So we're both clear and we're both aligned on that, chemistry is not necessarily bad. It can be. It's all about the details of whatever we mean by chemistry or the spark. Let's talk a little bit about the types of stuff that might be coming up for people, whether it's a therapeutic or clinical concern or just a regular problem of living concern. And the first one that comes up for me, we were talking about projection earlier, and I don't think projection, like we said, is good or bad, but I'm thinking of this psychoanalyst, and I know I brought him up to you before because his work is just so timeless, but Erich Fromm has this really brilliant insight in his book that I'm going to paraphrase for you now, and I want your reaction. Are you ready? He says it's something like, the degree to which people feel like they are crazy in love for each other upon meeting is directly proportional to the degree of how lonely they were before they encountered each other. And I think it is just it's just so devastating, but you can't help but laugh because it's true, isn't it? I don't know. I don't have a counter argument for it.
I was about to say, as you said that, I was like, no, that makes sense. That makes sense to me because I think to the degree, because I think what it really says is like when we meet someone and we're so, oh my God, it's like, then what I hear is like, what do you think they're saving you from? What do you think this relationship is going to be giving you that you don't currently have? But when you meet someone and you're grounded, right? Like Joe, you have a beautiful life. You live in New York. You have an incredible career. You have all of these amazing things that you're doing. You've got friends, you've got family, you've got a community around you, and you're doing things every day that fuel you in passion and give you that passion. You're also a human. Could you be lonely? Of course, right? Like those are not mutually exclusive. But I think to the degree as to how that is driving the car will then show how you can show up more grounded and saying, okay, well, if this doesn't work, that's okay because I was good before you, I'll be good after. And that's, my mama has always told me, you got to love yourself more than the need to be loved by other people. And I think that that's to that point of the quote is if you're so like, I'm so alone, I need this, well, then you're going to be cuckoo after one date. But if you come in saying, I feel really confident and secure, I want this, but I'm okay if it doesn't happen, you're able to then go on with your life. Because if this person doesn't work, that's okay. You'll meet someone else.
Yep, there's plenty of fish in the sea.
There are so many. Now, they might not be the kingfish that you want. I get that. But that doesn't mean that there's not. And I think what I hear is like, and this might lead us into that attachment conversation is like, as a child, I didn't have choice, right? I could not say, I don't want these parents. Give me new ones. Unsubscribe to my dad. No, unsubscribe meant you'd get beaten. So it's like, well, what are you going to do? Now, as an adult, though, I get a choice. And I think so many of us come from that little child, that amygdala part of our brain of like, I have to take this. There's nobody else. Who else is going to accept me? At least this is better than nothing, because we forget that we are adults with agency and choice, and we now get to make different decisions as that adult.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about attachment styles, because I think that one of the things that I observe, at least with people I work with, I'm curious if you observe something similar, is that it's typically towards the beginning. It's not necessarily like first, second, or third date stage of a relationship, but it's typically towards the beginning where there's kind of that push-pull dance, the anxious avoidant trap, where you have people on one hand who, and who's the psychologist that does the waves and the island metaphor?
Stan Tatkin.
Yeah, Stan Tatkin. So people that are the anxious avoidants. So the way I describe them is I say, imagine you're a little kid in a high chair, and your mom tells you that they're going to be right back, and you drop the sippy cup on the floor. The anxiously attached child is going to scream and scream and scream until the mother comes back to give them their sippy cup. The securely attached child, is maybe uncomfortable, like maybe, making some noises, really wants the sippy cup, but knows the mom is going to come back. And then the avoidant attached child just says, fuck it, and climbs out of the chair and gets the sippy cup. And so what sometimes happens is people who are more avoidantly oriented and more anxiously oriented, they end up finding each other. And when it comes to desire, when it comes to chemistry or the spark, that is such a potent mixture, because there's this constant push-pull, and those highs and lows can be really, it can be really fun when it's a high, and it can just be devastating when it's low. It's not always sustainable.
No, I rode that wave all fucking day when I was dating. Like the push pull dynamic, the because we have to remember it's like the anxious and avoidant trap is there for a reason, right? The anxious person feels, oh wow, look, the avoidant person can they can manage their emotions. They're not as reactive. Ooh, that's really attractive. I want stability. And then the avoidant and the attached person's like, oh wait, look at they can express themselves. Wow, they're so outwards. Ooh, they can get me. Oh, okay, cool. I feel until they get triggered. And then all of a sudden it's the dance. What I see quite often is, and I'm curious to see as you see this as well. I see that all the time, of course. You see the love bombing, or you see that everybody's great for first few dates until they're triggered, and then all of a sudden the dynamics play. What I really see, though, is a common misconception between the attachment styles and personality disorders. Like, I see people that'll be like, oh, they're avoidant. And I'm like, can you explain to me the behavior? And it's the way that they're describing it. I'm like, no, that person sounds like that person has avoidant personality disorder, like that they don't know how to even communicate with people, versus being avoidantly attached. When they get triggered, they might shut down, but that doesn't mean that this person can't still answer questions and hold a conversation.
Right. Well, that's why I clarified earlier. It does manifest in the earlier stages of a relationship, but in order to be avoidantly attached, you have to be attached. And that's
Right.
one of the biggest kind of, psychobabbling misconceptions that I see out there, is that so often people will label that person they've been on a few dates with as avoidantly attached. And well, you're presuming that they are now attached to you, because avoidants are not bad people.
No.
Well, the thing that people have to understand is that they're keeping love at arm's length. They don't want it too close. They feel smothered. They feel like they'll lose their freedom. But they don't want you to go away either. And that can be frustrating in the dance, because people take those signals to mean like, I don't want to be with you, or I don't love you, or I can't support you right now. But that's how they're self-soothing. The thing that I think our culture does is, if someone is really anxious and calls their love interest 15 times, we're just like, oh, well, they're like, they really like them. But if the avoidant person needs to spend a week alone and come out of their cave before they can reconnect, we're just like, you jerk, you insensitive a-hole. And I don't think that's fair. And it's not psychologically informed. The judgment just isn't.
100%. No, that's the TikTok University that taught a lot of these things. That villainization of the avoidant. And I know even Amir Levine, who wrote Attached, has come out to say, I was way too hard on the avoidant attached. I did not give them the fair equality that they deserve. My partner is more avoidantly attached. I'm more anxiously attached. We're incredibly secure in our partnership, but I don't ever think he's a bad person. And I'll give you an example. One of my clients, it's this, to your point, the exact same thing. And she's more that disorganized. Like, she's definitely has the amalgamation, but she leans more anxious. And she was dating a guy, and it's like, she would say, oh, well, it's like at her beckoning call, when she wanted it, it had to be available. But then the one guy, he says, listen, I just got home from work. And she said, well, I want to see you tonight. I guess they lived in the neighborhood or something, so it wasn't hard for them to see each other. And what her story was they had spent like almost every day that week together. So it's like, okay, you could also, like, it's been a month. You guys don't really know each other. You could also spend a night alone. And he said that. He said, listen, I'm exhausted. I really just need the night alone. She lost her fucking shit. How dare you? He's not into me. See, I told you he doesn't like me. And it's like, whoa, man. So you can say, I have to see you now, and it has to be in this moment. And we have to say okay to that. But because this person says, like, my partner will sometimes say, hey, babe, I'm going to put my headphones on. I need an hour. Great. Thank you for communicating. Go take your fucking time. Go take 2 hours. I don't care. Go take 3. Have your time. Where it becomes obviously the biggest caveat is like when there's just a shift in dynamic and you're like, what? But on the aggregate, I think that's the common misconception is we've villainized avoidance, and they're not bad people. They just shut down as opposed to somebody who goes outward. But yet we've said, oh, it's okay. You go outward. You're allowed to scream, cry, and protest all day. At least you're saying something. But what the anxiously attached don't realize is that the anxiously attached are also avoidant, and avoidants are also anxious. It just manifests differently because the anxiously attached person is avoiding dealing with what's coming up with them, because if I make it about you, I don't have to deal with myself. And that's where that dance becomes, I get it all day. He's avoidant, he's all this. And I'm like, wow, so you've had 2 dates with this guy. You know so much about him, but yet you haven't told me how you feel about it.
It's a concept that we've discussed off camera a little bit, but this idea, and we've alluded to it multiple times throughout this conversation, this idea of mindful dating and mindful partnership. It's just like checking in with yourself. Like, are you having fun? Did you have a connection with that guy you met, or is he really charismatic and everyone feels that way? when they talk to him.
Exactly.
That's something I'm often thinking about as well.
I dated a guy like that where I thought, oh my God, our connection's amazing. And we'd been hooking up for a couple of months. And I remember when I told him that, and I'll never forget his response was, oh, that's a little awkward. It's not you. I connect with everybody. And I was like, what? And he literally knew. And to his point, I was like, oh. And he was like, I'm easy to connect with. Like, I can talk and I can hold a conversation. And he was like, don't get me wrong. I think you're amazing. He's like, but I don't want a relationship with you. And to me, I talk that as, oh, but it's me, right? And it's like, no, that person's just really good at being gregarious and having a great external persona. That doesn't necessarily mean it's me, but also vice versa, right? Like, this morning, Ryan and I were doing something. And to your point, and the reason I bring this up is because it's important for us to look and understand how things are manifested, right? Like, he was being kind of a douche, right? Like, he was just walking around the kitchen, very cold. Had I not been self-aware, had we not been mindful, I was in a bad mood, right? Because you're trying to come down. I'm all chipper. Good morning, babe. How are you? I don't get my kiss. I don't get my hug. He puts his headphones in. Ugh, I didn't sleep. Okay, well, neither did I. I've got my period. I'm doing detox. I've got all these things. I'm exhausted. I got 2 hours of sleep last night. Okay, let me give my partner some space. All morning, he was just being rude and just being cold and just being insensitive, just shutting down, right? But he wasn't being like that out of malice. He was overwhelmed, and he does what he does. He shuts down. He goes inwards. And instead of me, if I were not self-aware and mindful in the reactions and what was going on, I would have then had my day and been in a bad mood and then probably been mean to somebody, had road rage, right? All that. Instead, I stopped. I said, wait, what's happening in my body? The way he's talking to me makes me feel like I'm dismissed. I don't feel like a priority here. It's my house too. And instead I said, hey, can I share something with you? I was like, I don't do this very well. I said, you're being really inconsistent, and you know that inconsistency is really tough for me, and I need to be honest with you. And then he stopped, and we ended up having like a 15-minute conversation of how he's struggling. He didn't know how to ask for help. And then we moved on. Kiss you. Goodbye. I love you. Go take the dog. I'll see you later. And the reason I bring that up is because mindful dating turns into mindful relationships. And instead of me just being like, oh, well, fuck him and he's a dick. No, instead I said, hey, I can acknowledge you're going through something, but that also impacts me as your partner in the home, and I need to share that with you so I don't have resentment and anger and just move on with my day. He took that. He might have shut down at first. He took 10 minutes. He came back. We had a conversation. He processed. The reason I share is because being mindful isn't just, okay, I'm not going to text them even though I want to hear from them. It's about really getting in your body and being able to differentiate. Is there a tiger? Is there a real threat here that I need to act on? Or am I creating a scenario that there's really no issue here and now I'm just finding a reason to have a problem?
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me, so when I was younger, I remember being completely hypnotized by this person that I was seeing. And yeah, I mean, totally. Talk about, like, I don't think it was as extreme as limerence or anything like that, but did not know them that well, and I was just convinced. I was so fixated, and I think a lot of us have those experiences. And I'll never forget what my therapist said to me at the time. He goes, Joey, it's okay to love your hookup buddy. He goes, but that doesn't mean that you should act on those feelings, because he's just your hookup buddy. And I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, and it was so freeing because I could be mindful. I could feel those things. I could send another text if I haven't heard, but because it had nothing to do with him or the relationship or the lack thereof or whatever it was. I was able to just be present to my experiences. And that's what mindfulness is for. It's to observe those thoughts and feelings, act on some of them, or you choose not to.
Oh, and 100%. My brother always says that too. His name is Joe, ironically. And he'll always say, he's like, why? Like anytime, because like he coaches people, he does his own stuff. But like anytime people will come and be like, but I'm so crazy and we have this great chemistry and sex and all that, but they don't want a relationship. And he would even stop and say, why does it have to be that though? Right? Like, can we just not acknowledge that you're having a really good time? This person satisfies a need for your life right in this moment, and that doesn't need to continue on. And I think that's really hard. That's the two conflicting thoughts of, oh, I can do this, but I don't have to be in a relationship with this person. And like, I even remember when I was supposed to be on Shark Tank a couple of years ago, and I'll save the story. It didn't, I was on set and I got sent home. It was like a whole thing. Welcome to the politics of TV. And I had one date with a guy, and he just so happened to call me to see how I was doing. And that phone call truly, I think, saved my life because I was in a really dark place. And I don't know what I would have done that night if I didn't have somebody that genuinely cared, called me, spent 35 fucking minutes on the phone. I never spoke to him again. And to this day, I have never been more grateful that date happened, because had that date not happened, this person wouldn't have called me. And if that person didn't call me, I don't know that I'd be sitting in front of you today doing what I'm doing. And it's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay that sometimes you have chemistry and that person doesn't have a connection with you. That doesn't mean that we have to attack ourselves. We can just acknowledge and say, well, that's just what it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, as someone who has learned how to practice being a more patient person, I think it's really easy to feel impatient, particularly when you're single and you want to be with someone, or when you're lonely. And patience is nothing. Psychologically, there's no difference between patience and learning to regulate your emotions when there's a delay.
100%.
Easier said than done.
And, to your point as well, like I hear that all the time of like, well, I'm lonely. And it's like, there's a difference between being alone and being lonely, because you could be alone and still feel full, and you could be with someone and still feel lonely. And I look at it as like my friend Jason Goldberg always says, are you good with or are you good without? Right? If you're not good without, you're not going to be good with. And so it's like, I get it. You're a human. I think people I get this all the time of like, oh, well, you're just lucky you met your husband. I'm like, first of all, he's not my husband yet. Second of all, we've been together for 2 years. I've been single for 15 years of my adult life outside of, some 6, 7, 8 month or type things. I been in the trenches. I've dated in New York and LA. I totally understand how lonely it can feel. But the reality is, if we don't have that relationship with ourselves, and if we don't really feel our cup is full, and I know that someone coming into my life is in addition to it, not instead of, I don't care. You could have anybody laying next to you in bed. You'll still feel alone.
Yeah, it makes me think of, is it a Brene Brown distinction where it's belonging versus fitting in? The fitting in, where it's like, well, if I say the right things and show up in a certain way, like then I will get this connection, I will get this love. Versus I'm myself, I'm authentic, I'm congruent, and you accept me. And I would actually say it's more powerful to feel accepted when you have differences, not when you have everything necessarily the same. Because number one, anyone who pretends to be the same as you is either not self-aware enough to know any different, or not in a deceptive way necessarily, but they're not being honest with you.
Yeah, they're full of shit. If it's like everything,
Yeah.
I had one of my clients is like a celebrity client. Like she's just well known, so you could Google her. And she actually had a guy where she was sitting, and at first she was like, "Wow, we have so much in common," until she realized he had been ChatGPTing her while they were talking, and was getting information about her while they were talking.
Whoa.
Right? That's the depths and the lengths people will go to feel like they're accepted and oh yeah, you like me. And so here's the
Yeah.
other acknowledgement. You could be super secure, right? You can be so secure in who you are and feel like you are a baddie and you're an amazing. That doesn't mean that you're also not going to be disappointed by rejection. And I think we also need to hold space for the the human emotions that are going to happen. You could be, I am a very secure person, right? It doesn't mean that if a troll leaves me a negative comment that I'm not going to still be like, ow, that hurt. But I don't let that negative comment or that troll dictate who I am. Who they think I am doesn't mean who I actually am. That to me is the difference. You're allowed to be bummed. You're allowed to be sad in dating. You're allowed to say, I'm tired and I'm just been doing this for a long time and I want a partner. You can have all of those while also knowing you're not just going to take whatever's off the street. Just because you're thirsty doesn't mean you drink the poison. And we have to be cognizant that you also get to make a choice and you don't just have to take what's there. And it's okay to hold those two conflicting thoughts.
And it's what's so tragic about the metaphor you just gave is that in places of desperation and loneliness, I've watched patients, people will drink the poison. They will do things they don't want to do. They will depart from their values just to feel less lonely, feel touched, feel appreciated. And you know what? If that's you and you're listening, that's also okay.
Totally. Everybody listening right now, you're fucking beautiful and amazing as you are, but you and I, Joe and I, can't be the ones to tell you that. And that's the differentiating part here. I know I have flaws. Please, I am a needy bitch. I am fickle. I have a lot of needs because that's who I am. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to allow those things to determine and dictate my self-worth. And so you can have all of these things and say, man, I'm feeling all of these things, but how you perceive yourself through those is really what's going to be the determining factor, not what you and I seem to think.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to make sure we talk about this idea of trauma as it comes up in dating. You've brought up repetition, compulsion earlier. I've mentioned limerence, which is where you become very significantly like obsessed with the love interest, not necessarily in a sexual way. How do you see trauma as it affects this idea of helping people get mindful to the type of chemistry or the type of spark that they're feeling. I'm curious, to ask someone who is super knowledgeable, but yet not necessarily clinically trained. I'm super curious to hear how you understand it.
For me, I understand that trauma will continue, of course, very non-clinically. You will continue to date the parts of you that are not healed. And you will continue to go after people hoping that, oh, if I just get this guy or this girl or this they, well, then all of the stuff from the past will go away. And I was her. I dated every different version of my dad. They looked like him. They talked like him. They sounded like him. Not obvious, like not exact, but like I married my father. I married a man that was, down to the same age, down to the same fucking courthouse that we got married to. And the reason being is because I had so much trauma that I kept thinking, well, you're going to save me. You're going to do this. I made it external. And until you really heal through the trauma and work with a therapist, a psychologist, somebody that understands how to take the trauma that you've been through, you are going to consistently and continuously keep dating the same people. So if you keep saying, I keep dating narcissists, I keep dating emotionally unavoidable people, I keep going after a spark, it's like, well, then we need to start to understand what about those people feels familiar, and what about those people feels like if you can get them, what do you think is going to happen to everything else that's ever happened? And that's something I find really interesting, because I've had clients that'll come to me and they're so hung up on these people. And then when you start to unravel, you pull on the string and you really start to see the whole sweater come apart, you start to realize they just reminded you of your mom, or they just reminded you of how you felt when you were dismissed as a kid, or the trauma will consistently come, and I will say it politely, it will fuck up your life until you deal with it, because trauma is what you resist. It will persist, and it will keep trailing and chasing you until you are aware of it. You are doing the work to heal through it, and then you are giving yourself the agency and choice to make different choices. Easier said than done. Don't get me wrong.
Definitely easier said than done. I want to add two things. I would say the first thing is that for those who are listening, if you feel like you're struggling in dating and you can't necessarily neatly pinpoint the different things, like to a traumatic experience or to a chaotic childhood or whatever it might be, what I would say is that everything that Sabrina just said that will mess you up, and it can also just all come from a lack of introspection and self-awareness. Until you
100%.
make some of those motivations more conscious, whether it's through whatever the feedback is, whether it's therapy or coaching or something else, you will probably stay in the same rut. And oftentimes what happens when I'm treating people and they become aware of the thing, they come to me and they all say the same thing every time. They go, well, Joe, now it's worse. Now it's worse that I'm aware of why I'm dating this person or why I'm stuck in this pattern, whether it's, the trauma or the attachment or the repetition compulsion, because now I'm aware and I can't stop myself from doing it. And what I would say is this is for me as a practitioner where some of the psychoanalysis and the psychobabble really starts to fall short, because then what you have to do is you have to, and everyone's different, it's a custom plan, but you have to learn how to desensitize yourself or resensitize yourself to different things. So just what might that look like? Let's say you keep dating your father, and your father was narcissistic or just super selfish, super self-involved. You likely, and you tell me how accurate this is. It's you have the insight. What do you do with the insight? How do you apply it? You slowly over time you resensitize yourself to the little red or yellow flags, if you will, of selfish behavior, because you've been desensitized. You grew up with it. This was a caretaker. You learned how to love this person. That's why it feels so easy and so natural and so good. So you have to resensitize yourself to that, but you may also want to desensitize yourself to other things. And that takes time. That takes practice. That might take multiple partners, multiple dates. It's all part of the journey, but I like the cognitive behavioral interpretation of it, because for me, whenever you tell people, it's like, well, oh, you're unconsciously attracted, to that person. There could be something a little bit disempowering about it. Versus, yeah. I think that the behavioral, it's like, oh, but like slowly over time, like wake up your nervous system to this or this until it's second nature to you. Exactly. Like that at least gives people a little bit of a roadmap.
100%. Like I did a talk the other night, and this girl came up to me after, and she was like, I don't know why I'm single. And I was like, okay, let's go. Those are always my favorite, because I'm like, okay, I get to play detective now. And she's going on and on about, like, I date all different types of people. And I said, okay, so can you describe to me certain things? And as she's starting to go on and on, I'm hearing, oh, she doesn't know how to set boundaries, right? Like, oh, well, this one guy did this, this, and this, and this, and then this guy did this, this, and this. when I kept, and then we talked, and and she just kept saying, but I just don't get it. And I finally stopped her and I said, no, here's the thing, but you do. And I said, you do get it. I said, it's not that I said, you're not stupid. Stop trying to intellectualize this of, but why, but why, but why? I said, at this point, what we need to stop to do is feel. You're so used to not setting boundaries. How does that, how does setting boundaries feel scary to you? Right. And so if I said, when I asked her, when you told this guy you wanted to go home and he said, no, you're staying here. And then we went and spent the night and we did all this. What were you scared of happening if you had said, no, I'm going home? Right? Oh, I was going to lose him. I'd leave him. Oh, okay, great. So then we can understand, so that's the fear that you're going to lose this person. They're not going to like you. They're not going to want you. Okay, where'd you learn that from? How old do you feel when things like that happen to you? Oh, well, my dad used to hit me when I'd said about, okay, so that was learned behavior. Or my child, my caregiver, whatever, insert here to this. And by the end of it, she looked at me and she's like, I still don't get it. And I just I stopped and I was like, and that's why you need to talk to a therapist, because you do get it, but it's so easy to just be like, I don't understand, and I'll just keep doing it. Because when you are aware and you start to realize and go, oh, I'm making a conscious choice to do this, I'm allowing this, it's really hard, because then we're met with shame and blame. And that doesn't have a place here. I can meet with accountability and radical ownership, but I don't have space for shame or blame. Shame or blame sounds like stop with the victim stuff. No one here, you don't need to villainize yourself and blame yourself for why this happened. But what I could say is, this guy said this, I didn't have any boundaries. I was hoping he was going to choose me. And by self-abandoning, I ended up getting ghosted. That is something that you can go, okay, moving forward, I will implement boundaries. I will go slow. Then there's an actionable like a roadmap. But the reality is, and that requires change, and that requires you to start saying no when you want to say yes. And it's really, that's working through trauma.
Beautiful. At the end of our conversation here, I would love to just think about, in your opinion, like where the kind of like the dating culture is, and like leave people with some kind of tangible, really practical takeaways. One thing that's coming up for me is that, if what you want to prioritize is desire and sensuality and sexuality and that kind of excitement and adventure, that's okay. But don't confuse that with the intimacy and the long-term stability that a partnership might give you. You can have both, to be clear. You can have both. But sometimes I think where people get messed up is they think that one will necessarily lead to the other. And if you're not being intentional about pursuing both of them at the same time, I'm not totally sure how that's going to work out for you. What do you think?
100%. What I've been really seeing a lot lately is we're getting more and more disconnected. Like we're craving this connection and intimacy, and everybody says that they want all these things, but yet when push comes to shove, it's I can't do that. And it's like there was just a poll done that they polled like 1,000 Gen Z people, and they found that out of all these people they polled, the Gen Z believes trust influencers more than they trust their own friends. And that is fucking scary. Because is right. Because what I'm seeing is even more disconnection, right? Well, this person said it, but you don't even. So what I hear is there's a lot of lack of self-trust. There's a lot of lack of true authentic acceptance and self-love. And there's a lack of a self-awareness, because I hear every single day, I want a relationship. I want a relationship. Why am I single? But then you talk to these people and there's nothing against anybody, but then you hear, I don't know what I want. Oh yeah, I just want someone I could do stuff with. There's a big disconnection with ourselves, because I think there's a fear of standing in your power and saying, no, I do have control over this and I can do this, because there is a rejection that comes with it. And so it's just easier to be like, I'll just keep doing what everybody else. If they wanted to, they would, right? Here's the clickbait, because having to show up as a different version of yourself means that you're going to be a lot lonelier. Yeah, there's going to be a lot more people that aren't going to work for you. And my advice is keep fucking showing up like that. Keep doing that, because I tell you right now, I would not have met my partner and be in the relationship I'm in if I didn't show up as myself and tell people, no, thank you, this doesn't align with me, and have people tell me that I don't align with them. And so I will just keep saying, keep doing the work on yourself, keep coming home to yourself, and keep getting curious about what's happening in your body. And so the minute you start to ask, why are they doing this? Bring it back to yourself of what's coming up for me. That will get you closer and closer, because when you really are understanding how I want to feel and what is it that I really want in a partnership and in a relationship, then you're no longer going to accept anything less, because you've validated that you deserve that. You've done the work to go back and heal those parts of you that don't believe that they are. And now you get to stand in that power, and you get to be the adult for the little you that nobody was there for when you were a kid.
what's also coming up for me as you talk about all of that is kind of it seems like all this information that we're putting out there, whether it's about like relationships or about nutrition or about politics, like really whatever it is. Sometimes I think that people view the knowledge as a way to kind of hang on to this illusion of control. I also saw a poll about Gen Z, and it was saying like, they're having less sex, they're getting drunk less, they're going on less dates, they're all these things. And I think it's important to end this conversation by noting that, when we're talking about like, the limerence or the unhealed trauma or this, it's, Sabrina and I are sitting here saying like, no, but like we've made all these mistakes. Like that's why we get to be where we are on our platforms and actually talk about it, not just from the intellectual expertise, but it's like, no, like I have lived this experience and I get it. And that's why when we say it's okay, it really is okay. And so in a weird way, like my advice, if you feel like you're stuck in a rut, is kind of like, well, maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to like have a few drinks and fall for a stranger and get your heart broken. Like live your life. You know what I mean? Like you will be okay.
Oh, 100%. They were saying like, and that's the thing. Gen Z, oh yeah, they don't do all those. It's like, but anxiety medication is like 200% up. And it's like, they have their own shit. Every generation is going to have another aspect of it. And I could not agree more with you. Go out and go to a bar in New York City and meet them. I'm not saying that you necessarily have to go home with them, but maybe go home with them. Be safe. Yeah. But I would just say, be safe, be smart. But have experiences. And I think we're in a culture where everyone's so scared of like, I don't want to get hurt, I don't want to feel this, that we're willing to completely remove ourselves. And that's where I feel like that disconnection is happening. I would not be where I'm at today if I didn't experience all the things I experienced. So use your experiences as part of your life, and then you can actually have something to say about it.
Right. Well, it's like, well, pick what kind of hard you want, right? Like
choose your hard.
Exactly. Like it's, to make the gesture that you want to see someone again after a first date is vulnerable. It is. But you know what else is really hard? Never going on a second date. Like that's also not fun. Like the rejection isn't fun either, so it's you're going to hurt no matter what. So you might as well do it in a way that supports you and however you want to go.
Couldn't agree more. Choose your fucking hard. Waking up could be a blessing or a curse to some people. Getting out of bed could be really hard or really beautiful. How we see it is how I think every challenge that comes my way, I'm like, cool, time to level up. It means I get to expand my window of tolerance. It means that I don't love it. Don't get me wrong. I didn't love when my name of my podcast was taken. But what did I know? I can get through that. I can get through hard. I can do this. And it builds your confidence. You don't just wake up one day being super confident and saying, I can handle rejection. You get through it. And that's how you realize that you could do it. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I also want people to get comfortable with paradox. Like when you're talking about relationships or love or sex, it's complex, it's tricky. Like there isn't necessarily that formula, and I think it's so easy to make a formula go viral. But it's not necessarily like as sexy, pun intended, to make this idea of, well, get comfortable with the paradox. If what you want is desire, right, you're going to need space. The person may not be available all the time, right? If what you want is intimacy and like a really, really deep loving relationship, well, like how are you going to navigate maintaining desire around that? Or like whatever, like your goal is your goal. It doesn't really matter what it is. But I think that people need to, like there's this idea that I also wanted to bring up to you, and I know we're nearing the end, but there's this idea that you need conditional and conditional love in a partnership, and the idea is that it's like the archetypal mother gives unconditional love. You're perfect in every way. I will always be here for you in every way. But then like the father is kind of like, well, you'll get more love if you achieve this or accomplish like this. And I think this idea that having both of them in a partnership is so important, because if you and I are dating, Sabrina, and I give you so much unconditional love, and you start taking care of yourself, you start drinking too much, you stop moving, like whatever that means, right? Like is it actually the loving thing to do to just accept that part of you, or do I say no, but there's paradox all tied up in that as well.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think love is very conditional in our adult life. If my partner starts acting like an asshole, I'm not just going to stick around and take it. It's like you don't get to just like change who you are, and I just have to accept it. And I think I think it's really important also getting being uncomfortable, right? Like everything has to be like I did a video on instead of ghosting, say this, and the amount of people that are like, I'd rather get ghosted. It's easier, and it's like, oh, so you just want nothing in life to be a challenge to you? Well, good luck growing then, because I didn't start my business by saying, well, I just want to show up and everything happens to me. It's like you don't just post online and all of a sudden your shit goes viral. It's like there is something that you actually need to invest in. And I think that paradox is really important to know that like there are a lot of things that are going to be conditional. And that means that you also have to control your reaction to emotions, and that you don't just get to go and do whatever you want because, well, this person's always going to love me. To me, that then is enabling them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea that I don't want to, communicate with this person. I'd rather just ghost. Like it's just easier. It's to me, it's like related to this idea that love and relationship, the spark, is something that you will magically encounter if you just swipe on the right person or run into them. When, as you know, and I think that your brand is dedicated to this so beautifully, it is a craft. It takes knowledge and practice. And if you're not happy with where you are, maybe it's because there's still stuff to learn and there's still stuff to practice. I know I'm still there, and so there's no shame in it.
Same with me. You think my business is where I want it to be? I'm not Mark Cuban, right? It's like I'm still learning and growing and evolving my relationships, every aspect, and that's the part of it. That to me is the fun part. If I peaked, if this was it, oh, that wouldn't be very fun in my 30s to be like, all right, well, that's that. Thanks for all the stuff. And I think we can always look forward to something, but it's really our mindset that's going to be what determines the success and the outcome of things. Because sure, you want to woe is me, lay down and be like, the world is so mean, everything's happening to me. Well, good luck with that. Versus, no, this is happening for me and I can grow. So much more empowering.
Absolutely. Well, this is far from over in all of the different dimensions. How can people find you? And most importantly, like, how are you helping people right now? Like, what's the latest course offering? Like, how are you engaging your community?
Oh, I like that question. Thank you. So SabrinaZohar.com or Sabrina.Zohar on TikTok and Insta, or the Sabrina Zohar Show on Insta. You could catch Joe. You're coming out by the time this comes out. I think it'll be out in a couple of weeks on the Sabrina Zohar Show. So I'm super excited.
Oh, amazing.
And right now I'm focused. I created a new course with a good friend of mine on the nervous system regulation in the first 0 to 3 months. And I think it's just something that I'm really passionate about because I see so many relationships get really impacted because people act on the anxiety or they get too anxious or I don't know what to do. And so we really wanted to come back, and it's like I have a few courses, but specifically between that and the foundation course, because my job here is to help you come home to yourself. I can't guarantee I'm going to find you a partner. And I think anybody who does is full of shit because my crystal ball is in the shop. But what I can do is help you come back home to yourself and feel more centered and balanced in your gut and in your body and in who you are. And then thus that will then translate into the world. And so that's what I'm excited about. If you guys want to join any of the courses, everything's at SabrinaZohar.com.
All right. Excellent. Absolutely love it. Thanks so much. See you next time.
Thanks.
And if you're still listening, please like or subscribe wherever you are listening or watching this video. We would really, really appreciate it.